I was standing on my back deck with a cup of coffee when I noticed the construction crew swarming my lakefront property like ants on a dropped popsicle. And that was the moment I knew my peaceful morning in Lake Norman, North Carolina, was about to turn into an absolute nightmare. My name is Yates Silverman, and I had bought this 3-acre property specifically for its private lake access. I am a software developer who works from home, and the quiet solitude of the water was exactly what I needed after spending 15 years in the chaos of Charlotte's tech scene. The property cost me a fortune, but every penny was worth it for the 100 feet of pristine waterfront that came with it. Or at least, it had been worth it until today. I set down my coffee and walked across the lawn, my bare feet soaking in the morning dew. There were 4 men in bright orange vests drilling posts into my shoreline. A large flatbed truck was parked on what looked like fresh tire tracks through my grass, and someone had already dumped a pile of treated lumber on my beach. "Hey," I shouted, breaking into a jog. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" One of the workers, a burly guy with a gray beard, looked up from his drill. "HOA project, buddy. Public pier construction. Should be done in about a week." My brain stuttered. "Public pier? This is private property, my private property." The man shrugged and pulled out a crumpled work order from his back pocket. "Says here we are building a community access pier at 4750 Lakeshore Drive. That is this address, right?" "That is my address, but this is not HOA property. I own this land all the way to the water." I could feel my pulse hammering in my temples. Another worker, younger with a shock of red hair, chimed in. "Look, man, we just do what we are told. You got a problem, take it up with the HOA. We got a signed contract and permits." "Permits? Let me see those permits." Gray Beard handed me a folder. Inside was a construction permit from Iredell County, a work order from the Lakeshore Estates HOA, and a site plan showing a 40-foot pier extending into Lake Norman. The problem was glaringly obvious. The survey map they had used was completely wrong. They had marked this section of shoreline as common area when it was definitely, absolutely, without question my deeded property. "Stop working," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "Right now. Stop." "We cannot do that," Gray Beard said, already turning back to his drill. "We got a schedule." I pulled out my phone and dialed the number on the work order. A cheerful recorded voice informed me that the Lakeshore Estates HOA office hours were Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. It was Saturday morning. Of course it was. The drilling resumed, the sound splitting the peaceful morning like a chainsaw through silk. I stood there, feeling helpless and furious in equal measure as these men continued to drive posts into my property. I had 2 choices: call the police or let them work until Monday when I could sort this out with the HOA. The problem with calling the police was that these guys had permits, even if the permits were based on fraudulent information. The cops would probably tell me it was a civil matter. I went back inside and pulled out my property documents. The deed was crystal clear. I owned 3 acres with approximately 100 feet of lake frontage, clearly marked with survey stakes when I had purchased the property 2 years ago. I even had a recent survey I had commissioned 6 months ago when I was considering building a boathouse. The boundaries were indisputable. By noon, the workers had sunk 6 posts into the lake bed and were starting to frame out the pier structure. I had called every emergency number I could find for the county, but weekend staffing meant I kept getting voicemails. I left increasingly frustrated messages explaining that someone was building on my private property without permission. I tried the HOA emergency number. A woman answered on the 5th ring, sounding annoyed. "Lakeshore Estates HOA emergency line." "Yes, hi. There is a construction crew building a pier on my private property and I need someone to stop them immediately. Name: Yates Silverman, 4750 Lakeshore Drive. I heard typing. I see you were sent notification about the community pier project 3 weeks ago. I never received any notification, and regardless, this is my private property, not community property. Sir, the Lakeshore Estates Master Plan clearly designates lake access points for community use. The pier is being built on one of those designated access points. Madam, I own this land. I have a deed. I have a survey. This is not HOA property. I will leave a message for our president, Brenda. She will be in touch on Monday. Monday. They will be done by Monday. Sir, there is nothing I can do on a weekend. Please address this with Brenda Kensington during business hours. She hung up. Brenda Kensington. I had met her exactly once, at a mandatory HOA meeting 6 months after I moved in. She was a woman in her late 40s with that particular haircut that seemed to be required for HOA board members, short, heavily highlighted, and aggressively styled. She had spent the entire meeting discussing bylaws, violations, and the importance of maintaining property values. I remembered thinking, she seemed like the type who would call the cops on kids for selling lemonade without a permit. By Sunday afternoon, the pier was half finished. It jutted out into the lake like an accusatory finger, and there were already people walking on it. Families from the neighborhood were treating it like it was their own personal dock. I watched from my deck as kids ran up and down the boards while their parents took photos. One man was even setting up a fishing chair. I walked down to confront them. Excuse me, this is private property. The fishing guy, wearing a Bass Pro Shop hat and mirrored sunglasses, barely glanced at me. HOA sent an email, community pier, public access. It was built on my property without permission. He finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of annoyance and disbelief. Dude, do not be that guy. This is for everyone in the neighborhood. Stop being selfish. Selfish. I had paid top dollar for waterfront property, and I was selfish for not wanting strangers building on it. I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it. These people did not care. They had been told by the HOA that this was legitimate, and they were going to use it. Monday morning, I was at the HOA office when it opened at 9. The office was located in a small building near the neighborhood entrance, decorated with the kind of generic inspirational posters you see in dentist waiting rooms. A young receptionist with bored eyes looked up from her computer. I need to speak with Brenda Kensington immediately. Do you have an appointment? No, but I have an emergency. She had a pier built on my private property this weekend. The receptionist's boredom did not waver. Let me see if she is available. She disappeared into a back office. I heard muffled voices. After 5 minutes, she returned. Miss Kensington will see you now. Brenda Kensington's office was exactly what I expected: pristine, organized to the point of obsession, with framed photos of herself accepting various community awards. She sat behind her desk, wearing a cream-colored blazer and that same aggressive haircut, her lips pressed into a thin line that might have been a smile on someone else. Mr. Silverman, I understand you have concerns about the new community pier. Concerns? You built a structure on my private property without my permission. That is not a concern. That is illegal. She folded her hands on her desk. The pier was built on community-designated lake access, as outlined in the Lakeshore Estates Master Plan from 1987. I do not care what your master plan says. I have a deed that proves I own that land. Your master plan is wrong. Mr. Silverman, when you purchased your property, you agreed to abide by all HOA rules, regulations, and master plans. That includes designated community spaces. I pulled out my survey and slapped it on her desk. This is a professional survey from 6 months ago. It clearly shows my property boundaries. Your pier is on my land." Brenda glanced at the survey like it was a child's crayon drawing. "We have our own surveys and they show something different. The county approved our permits based on our documentation." "Then your documentation is fraudulent." Her eyes hardened. "Mr. Silverman, I would be very careful about making accusations. The HOA board voted unanimously to approve this project. We followed all proper procedures. If you have a problem with it, you are welcome to file a formal complaint, which will be reviewed at our next board meeting in 6 weeks. 6 weeks? The pier is already built. Then I suppose the timing works out, does it not?" She stood up, indicating the meeting was over. "If there is nothing else, I have a very busy schedule." I did not move. "I want that pier removed from my property immediately, or I will take legal action." "You are certainly welcome to pursue legal options, though I should warn you that HOA disputes can be very costly and time-consuming. We have excellent attorneys on retainer." She smiled, and it was the smile of someone who had won this fight 100 times before. "Have a nice day, Mr. Silverman." I left the office shaking with anger. I spent the rest of Monday on the phone with attorneys. The first 3 told me that HOA disputes were not their specialty. The fourth, a real estate attorney named Patricia Morrison, agreed to meet with me Tuesday morning. Patricia's office was in Cornelius, overlooking the lake. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 60s who listened to my entire story without interrupting, reviewing my documents with practiced efficiency. "You have a strong case," she finally said. "Your survey is clear. Your deed is ironclad. The problem is that HOA disputes move slowly. I can file an injunction, but realistically, we are looking at weeks, possibly months before we get a court date. And that is assuming the HOA does not fight every step of the way, which they will." "How much will this cost?" "Retainer of $5,000. Total costs, depending on how hard they fight, could be anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000. I felt sick. "Are you kidding me? HOAs have deep pockets and expensive lawyers. They know most homeowners cannot afford to fight them, so they do whatever they want. I have seen this pattern dozens of times." "So what do I do?" Patricia leaned back in her chair. "Officially, I advise you to let me handle this through proper legal channels. Unofficially," she raised an eyebrow, "that pier is on your property. You have the right to remove any structure someone builds on your land without permission. You are saying I should tear it down myself. I am saying nothing of the sort. I am simply noting that property owners have rights, and sometimes those rights need to be exercised directly." She slid a business card across her desk. "This is a demolition contractor I know, very discreet, very efficient. Call him if you want an estimate for removing an unauthorized structure." I took the card. "And if the HOA sues me?" "Then we show the court your deed, your survey, and the fact that they built on your property without permission. You would have every legal right to remove it. The question is whether you want to deal with the fight that will follow." I thought about Brenda Kensington's smug smile. I thought about the families using my waterfront like it was a public park. I thought about spending $50,000 over the next year fighting a battle I should not have to fight. Give me a day to think about it. I went home and stared at the pier. There were teenagers sitting on it, dangling their feet in the water. A woman was doing yoga on the boards. Nobody asked permission. Nobody cared that it was my property. To them, the HOA had spoken, and that was that. I called the number on Patricia's card. A gruff voice answered. "Turner Demolition." "Hi, my name is Yates Silverman. Patricia Morrison gave me your number. I need a quote for removing a pier." "What kind of pier?" "About 40 feet long, wooden construction, built this weekend, and I need it done fast." "When were you thinking?" Tomorrow night. There was a pause. That fast usually costs extra. Money is not the issue, discretion is. I can do tomorrow night, but it will be loud. We are talking saws, possibly a barge if the posts are deep. People will notice. I do not care if people notice. I just want it gone. We agreed on a price that made me wince $8,000 for a rush job. But it was better than $50,000 in legal fees, and infinitely more satisfying than watching strangers enjoy my property for the next 6 months while lawyers argued. Tuesday afternoon, I called every neighbor within earshot and left polite messages. Hi, this is Yates from 4750 Lakeshore. Just wanted to give you a heads up that I am having some work done on my property tomorrow night. It might be a little noisy. Sorry for any inconvenience. Tuesday night, I did not sleep. I kept rehearsing conversations with the police, with Brenda, with angry neighbors. I pulled out every document I had: deed, survey, property tax records, even the original listing from when I bought the house. Everything proved this was my land. Wednesday at dusk, Turner showed up with a crew of 3 and a small barge. He was a thick-shouldered man in his 50s with calloused hands and the no-nonsense demeanor of someone who had demolished a lot of things in his life. That the pier. He pointed at the structure, currently occupied by a couple watching the sunset. That is it. You are sure about this? Once we start, there is no putting it back. I am sure, he nodded. Give us 4 hours. I walked down to the pier. The couple looked up, smiling. Beautiful evening, the woman said. It is. Unfortunately, I need to ask you to leave. I am having this pier removed tonight. The man's smile faded. Removed? Why? Because it was built on my private property without permission. But the HOA does not own this land. I do. Please leave. They gathered their things, muttering about lawsuits and crazy people. I did not care. I watched them walk back toward their house, then signaled to Turner. The saws started at 8 o'clock. The sound ripped through the evening quiet like a scream. Turner's crew worked with impressive efficiency, cutting the pier into sections and loading them onto the barge. The posts required a specialized drill to extract from the lake bed. Lights blazed from their equipment, turning my backyard into a construction zone. Neighbors started appearing around 8:30. They stood on the property line, watching with expressions ranging from confusion to outrage. I stood on my deck, arms crossed, and met their stares. At 9:15, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Brenda Kensington flanked by 2 other board members, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, and a heavy-set woman with a perm. What do you think you are doing? Brenda demanded, her voice shrill. Removing an illegal structure from my property. That pier was approved by the board. It cost $18,000. Then you should not have built it on someone else's land. The man with glasses stepped forward. We will sue you for every penny. Destruction of HOA property, violation of bylaws. It is not HOA property. It is my property, and I have every document needed to prove it. I held up my folder. You built on my land without permission. That is called trespassing and construction without consent. You want to sue? Go ahead. I will countersue for the cost of this removal plus damages. Brenda's face had gone red. You cannot just destroy community property. It is not community property. My voice rose to match hers. How many times do I have to say it? You made a mistake. You used an old, incorrect survey. This land is mine, and that pier had no right to be here. The county issued permits based on fraudulent information that you provided. Take it up with them. Behind them, more neighbors had gathered. I could hear muttering, angry voices mixing with the sound of saws. Someone shouted that I was ruining property values. Someone else said I was being selfish. A few people, thankfully, were asking Brenda why the HOA had not verified property boundaries before building. "We are calling the police," Brenda said. "Please do. I would love to show them my deed." She pulled out her phone and dialed. I went back to watching the demolition. By 10:30, the pier was completely gone. All that remained were holes in the lake bed where the posts had been and a pile of lumber on Turner's barge. Turner walked up to me, wiping his hands on his pants. "All done. You want us to fill those holes?" "Please." 2 police cruisers arrived at 11. Officers Ramirez and Chen listened to Brenda's hysterical explanation, then asked to see my documentation. I showed them my deed and survey. They studied the documents with flashlights, compared them to the HOA's master plan that Brenda had brought, and conferred quietly. Officer Ramirez, a calm woman with graying hair, finally spoke. "Madam, his deed and survey clearly show this is private property. The HOA had no authority to build here." "But we had permits," Brenda insisted. "Permits based on incorrect property information do not override deeds. This is a civil matter between you and Mr. Silverman. He had the right to remove structures from his property. He destroyed $18,000 of HOA property." "It was not HOA property," Officer Chen said patiently. "It was built on his land without permission. You will need to resolve this through civil court." Brenda turned to me, her voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. "You just made an enemy of everyone in this neighborhood." "I made an enemy of you," I corrected. "Most of these people do not even know what is really happening. You told them this was legal and they believed you. But you knew it was wrong, did you not? You saw my property lines and decided to ignore them because you wanted a community pier and you did not want to pay for waterfront access. You will regret this." She turned and stalked away, her board members scrambling after her. The police asked a few more questions, verified that everything was in order and left. The neighbors dispersed slowly, casting backward glances. Turner finished filling the post holes with gravel and sand, restoring the shoreline to approximately how it had looked before. "All set," he said. "You want these lumber scraps?" "No. Dispose of them however you want." "You got it." He paused. "For what it is worth, I have done a lot of demo work. Usually I feel bad about tearing things down. This one felt right." I paid him in full, added a generous tip, and watched his crew pack up. By midnight, my property was mine again. The lake was quiet. The shore was empty. I sat on my deck with a beer and tried to feel victorious, but mostly I just felt exhausted. Thursday morning, I found a letter taped to my door. It was from the HOA legal department, informing me that I was being sued for destruction of community property, violation of bylaws, and creating a hazardous condition. They were demanding $18,000 plus legal fees, and they were placing a lien on my property pending resolution. I forwarded everything to Patricia Morrison. She called me an hour later, laughing. "They actually put a lien on your property. Based on what?" Apparently, I violated their bylaws. "They cannot lien your property for tearing down something they illegally built. This is absurd. I will have that lien removed by Monday and file a countersuit for harassment and trespassing." "How much is this going to cost me?" "The lien removal is straightforward, maybe $1,000. The countersuit, if they fight it, could get expensive." "But honestly, Yates, I do not think they will fight hard once a judge sees your documentation. The HOA knows they messed up. They are just trying to bully you into backing down." "I am not backing down." "Good. Start documenting everything. Every interaction with the HOA, every letter, every conversation. If they harass you, I want evidence." The harassment started almost immediately. Friday, I received a violation notice for having construction debris on my property, the gravel and sand used to fill the post holes. The fine was $500. Saturday, Another notice. My grass was allegedly half an inch too long. $200 fine. Sunday, my mailbox was supposedly 6 inches too far forward from the designated setback. $300 fine. I photographed everything, measured everything, and forwarded it all to Patricia. The grass was well within acceptable limits. The mailbox had not moved since I bought the house. The construction debris was natural material used for landscaping. Every single violation was fabricated. Monday, Patricia filed to have the lien removed and sent a cease and desist letter to the HOA, warning them that continued harassment would result in additional legal action. She also filed a countersuit for $15,000, the cost of my legal fees, the demolition, plus damages for harassment and stress. Tuesday, I got a phone call from a number I did not recognize. I answered cautiously. "Mr. Silverman, this is Robert Chen from Channel 7 News. We received a tip about an HOA dispute in your neighborhood. Would you be willing to discuss it on camera?" I hesitated. Going public could make things worse, but it could also put pressure on the HOA to back down. "What do you know so far?" "We know the HOA built a pier on your private property and that you had it removed. We have been covering a lot of HOA overreach stories lately. This sounds like it fits the pattern." "Can I think about it?" "Sure. But just so you know, we are talking to your neighbors too. It would be good to have your side of the story." He was right. If Brenda got to shape the narrative, I would be the villain. "Okay. When do you want to meet?" The interview happened Wednesday afternoon. Robert Chen was a young reporter with an earnest face and a good instinct for the story. He filmed my property, reviewed my documents, and asked pointed questions about the HOA's actions. Did they ever apologize for the mistake? No. They immediately threatened to sue me. "And these violation notices you have been receiving, all fabricated. My lawyer has documentation proving every single one is baseless. What do you want people to know about this situation?" I looked directly at the camera. HOAs are supposed to protect property values and maintain communities. But too often, they become little dictatorships run by people who care more about power than fairness. Brenda Kensington and the Lakeshore Estates Board built on my property without permission, refused to fix their mistake, and are now retaliating against me for asserting my legal rights. I am not the villain here, they are. The story aired Friday evening. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My phone blew up with messages from neighbors, some supportive, many angry. The HOA online forum exploded with arguments, but the public pressure worked. By Saturday morning, 3 board members had resigned, citing the controversy and stress. Brenda, however, doubled down. She sent an email to the entire neighborhood painting me as a selfish troublemaker who destroyed a community amenity out of spite. She claimed I was lying about the property boundaries and that the HOA's survey was legitimate. Patricia advised me to ignore it. She is digging her own grave. The more she talks, the worse she looks. Monday brought the court hearing for the lien removal. The judge was a severe-looking woman named Judith Hartford, who clearly had no patience for nonsense. She reviewed my deed, my survey, and the HOA's master plan in less than 10 minutes. "Counselor," she said to the HOA's attorney, a slick young man in an expensive suit, "your client placed a lien on Mr. Silverman's property for removing a structure that was built on his land without permission. What is your legal justification for this?" "Your Honor, the HOA master plan designates that area as community lake access. The deed supersedes the master plan. The property belongs to Mr. Silverman. The HOA had no authority to build there. The lien is removed." She banged her gavel. "Furthermore, I am ordering the HOA to pay Mr. Silverman's legal fees for this hearing. $3,000. And if I see any more frivolous actions from your client, I will not be happy. Do we understand each other? The attorney nodded, his face tight. Outside the courthouse, Patricia was grinning. That went better than expected. Judge Hartford hates HOA overreach. She has ruled against them in 3 other cases this year. What about the countersuit? We have a hearing scheduled for next month. Based on today, I would say we have a strong chance of winning. The question is whether the HOA will settle before then. They did not settle. Instead, Brenda launched a campaign to have me expelled from the neighborhood. She circulated a petition claiming I was a danger to community harmony and requesting that the board invoke a little-used bylaw allowing for forced sale of properties in extreme circumstances. The petition got 40 signatures out of 200 homes. It went nowhere legally, but it created a toxic atmosphere. People stopped waving when I drove past. Kids playing in the street would scatter when I appeared. Someone spray painted "selfish" on my mailbox. I called a community meeting. The HOA tried to block it, but I rented the clubhouse directly through the management company, bypassing the board. I sent invitations to every house in the neighborhood, laying out the facts. The deed, the survey, the timeline of events, and the harassment I had endured. 70 people showed up. Brenda was there, sitting in the front row with her arms crossed and murder in her eyes. I stood at the podium and told the whole story, showing documents on a projector screen. I showed my deed, clearly marking my property boundaries. I showed the survey the HOA had used, which was from 1987 and outdated. I showed photos of the pier construction on my land. I showed every violation notice I had received and the evidence proving they were false. I am not against community amenities, I said. I am against the HOA building on private property without permission and then bullying people who stand up for their rights. If Brenda had come to me before construction and asked to verify the property lines, we could have avoided all of this. Instead, she assumed she was right, refused to admit the mistake, and launched a harassment campaign when I asserted my legal rights. A woman in the back raised her hand. Why did not you just let them use your waterfront? It is not like you were using it. Because it is mine. I paid for it. And if I let the HOA take it now, what is next? Can they decide your backyard would make a nice community garden? Can they turn your driveway into guest parking? Property rights matter. If we let the board ignore them once, they will keep ignoring them. A man in the middle stood up. But that pier was nice. My kids loved it. Then the HOA should build one on actual community property or buy waterfront access legitimately. They do not get to steal mine. Brenda stood, her voice cutting through the murmurs. You destroyed an $18,000 amenity out of spite. You could have worked with us, but instead you went nuclear. I did work with you. I came to your office. I showed you my deed. You dismissed me and threatened to sue. You forced this confrontation, not me. You are a liar and a bully. Patricia, sitting in the back, stood up. Miss Kensington, I would be careful about making defamatory statements in a public forum. We are already suing you. Do not make it worse. Brenda's face went purple, but she sat down. The meeting ended with mixed reactions. Some people came up to shake my hand and apologize for believing the HOA's narrative. Others left shaking their heads, convinced I was just a troublemaker. But the important thing was that the truth was out there now. People knew what had really happened. 2 weeks later, the county released a statement. After reviewing the surveys and deeds, they confirmed that the permits issued for the pier had been based on incorrect property information. The permits were void, and the HOA would be fined for providing false information on a permit application. The fine was $10,000. Brenda tried to fight it, claiming the mistake was unintentional. But the county investigator discovered something interesting. Brenda had been sent a copy of my survey 6 months earlier when I was considering the boathouse. She had seen my correct property boundaries and chosen to ignore them. That changed everything. It was not a mistake anymore. It was intentional fraud. Patricia filed an amended lawsuit, adding fraud and intentional trespass to the charges. We increased our demand to $50,000. The HOA board finally cracked. 2 more members resigned. The remaining board called an emergency election. Brenda was removed as president by a vote of 62%. The new board president was a retired attorney named Donald Fletcher. His first action was to call me directly. "Mr. Silverman, I want to apologize on behalf of the HOA. What happened to you was unacceptable. Brenda acted recklessly and dishonestly, and you suffered because of it. We would like to settle this matter fairly and move forward. What are you proposing?" "We will pay your legal fees, your demolition costs, and $15,000 in damages. Total of $30,000. In exchange, you drop the lawsuit and we all move on." I discussed it with Patricia. She thought it was fair, given the cost and time of continuing litigation. I agreed. The settlement was signed in April. The check arrived 2 weeks later. I used part of it to build a beautiful flagstone patio on my waterfront with a small private dock just for me. It was everything I had wanted when I bought the property. Brenda Kensington was not done, though. In June, I learned she had filed a formal complaint with the county, claiming I had built my dock without permits. The county inspector came out, verified that I had pulled all proper permits and that my dock was on my property, and dismissed the complaint. The inspector pulled me aside as he was leaving. "Between you and me, Miss Kensington has filed 6 complaints against various residents in the past month. We are starting to flag her as a vexatious complainant. If she keeps this up, her complaints will be automatically dismissed." In July, Brenda was sued by another homeowner for harassment. Apparently, she had been issuing violation notices from her personal email, even though she was no longer on the board. The homeowner claimed she was running a shadow HOA, making up rules and demanding fines. The lawsuit went public. More homeowners came forward with stories of Brenda's harassment. Someone discovered she had been pocketing some of the violation fines, claiming they were administrative fees. The amount was small, maybe $3,000 over 2 years, but it was theft. That was when the police got involved. In August, Brenda Kensington was arrested for embezzlement and fraud. The charges stemmed from the violation fine scheme and her intentional use of false property information to obtain construction permits. The case was not huge white-collar crime, rarely is in suburban neighborhoods, but it was enough. I watched the arrest on the local news, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Brenda had created this entire situation through arrogance and dishonesty. She could have admitted the mistake, apologized, and moved on. Instead, she had doubled down, lied, harassed, and ultimately broken the law. The trial happened in November. Brenda was convicted of 1 count of embezzlement and 1 count of fraud. She was sentenced to 18 months probation, ordered to pay full restitution to the HOA and to me, and banned from serving on any HOA board in North Carolina for 10 years. I did not attend the trial. I had moved on. My property was beautiful, my dock was finished, and I had finally found the peace I had been looking for when I bought the place. The neighborhood had slowly returned to normal. Most people had forgotten about the Pier controversy. A few neighbors had become genuine friends, bonding over shared frustration with HOA overreach. In December, I was sitting on my new dock, watching the sun set over Lake Norman when my phone rang. It was Donald Fletcher, the new HOA president. Yates, I have a question for you. The board is discussing building a legitimate community pier on actual HOA property. We found a small parcel we own about a quarter-mile down the shore. Before we move forward, I wanted to ask if you would be willing to consult on the project. Make sure we do it right this time. I laughed. You want the guy who tore down your last pier to help build a new one. I want someone who knows property law and is not afraid to call us out if we screw up. We will pay you for your time. I thought about it. Part of me wanted nothing to do with the HOA ever again. But another part recognized that this was an olive branch, a genuine attempt to make amends and do better. Okay, I will consult, but only if you promise to verify every single property line before breaking ground. Deal. The new pier was built in March. It was on legitimate HOA property, properly permitted, and actually nicer than the one they had built on my land. The grand opening was a neighborhood event. Kids ran up and down the boards, parents took photos, and someone set up a grill for hot dogs. Donald gave a speech thanking everyone who worked on the project. At the end, he said something that made me feel like maybe all the fighting had been worth it. This pier represents what our community can be when we follow the rules, respect property rights, and work together. It exists because we learned from our mistakes. I hope everyone here remembers that HOAs are not above the law. We are here to serve homeowners, not rule over them. People applauded. A few looked at me and nodded. I nodded back. That night, sitting on my own dock with a cold beer, I reflected on the whole insane journey. It had started with a simple moment, me standing in my yard with coffee, watching strangers tear up my property. It had escalated into legal battles, public confrontations, arrests, and ultimately real change in how the HOA operated. Had it been worth it? The stress, the money, the conflict with neighbors, yes. Because if I had backed down, the HOA would have kept that pier on my property. They would have kept bullying homeowners who challenged them. Brenda would have continued her petty tyranny until someone else finally stood up to her. Sometimes you have to fight, even when it is hard, even when people call you selfish or difficult. Property rights matter. The rule of law matters. And people who abuse power need to be held accountable. I finished my beer and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new projects, new things to worry about. But tonight, sitting by my lake on my property with my dock, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Peace. The story does not end there, though. In the following months, something interesting happened. Other homeowners who had been silently suffering under HOA overreach started speaking up. A man 3 streets over successfully fought a violation for painting his house the wrong shade of beige. The shade he had painted was literally on the approved list, but Brenda had claimed it was not. He won and got his fine refunded. A woman who had been told she could not install solar panels despite state law protecting her right to do so, got her panels installed and received an apology from the board. The HOA started operating transparently. Board meetings became actually open to homeowners, not just rubber stamp sessions. Financial statements were published quarterly. Violation notices required photographic evidence and clear citation of the specific bylaw being violated. It was not perfect. HOAs never are, but it was better. And that improvement existed because one person had refused to back down when they were in the right. People asked me sometimes if I had any regrets, if I would do anything differently. The answer was always no. Well, maybe I would have documented everything even more thoroughly from the start. Maybe I would have gone to the media sooner. But the core decision to stand up for my property rights and demolish that illegal pier, I would make that same choice again without hesitation. By spring of the following year, my life had fully stabilized. Work was good. The neighborhood was peaceful. I had even started dating someone. I met at a community barbecue a woman named Catherine, who thought the whole Pier story was hilarious and admired that I had fought back. Catherine Sterling was a nurse at a hospital in Huntersville, with dark curly hair and a laugh that made me smile every time I heard it. We had connected over shared frustration with bureaucracy. Her stories about hospital administration were almost as absurd as my HOA tales. One evening in May, we were sitting on my dock, watching boats cruise across the lake, when she asked the question I had been dreading. "Do you think you will ever be able to just relax here? Or will you always be waiting for the next HOA disaster?" I thought about it. "I think I am done fighting." The HOA learned its lesson. They have new leadership. If they try something again, I will deal with it, but I am not looking for battles anymore. "Good," she said, leaning her head on my shoulder, "because I like you too much to watch you stress yourself into an early grave over dock placement." We sat in comfortable silence as the sun painted the sky orange and pink. Somewhere across the lake, I could hear kids laughing at the new community pier. It was a good sound. It meant the HOA had done something right. My phone buzzed. I ignored it at first, but Catherine nudged me. Could be important. It was an email from Patricia Morrison. The subject line read, "Thought you would want to know." I opened it. The message was brief. Brenda Kensington violated her probation by attempting to serve on an HOA board in South Carolina under a different name. She was arrested again. Thought you would appreciate the update. You really got under her skin. I showed Catherine. She whistled. "That woman cannot help herself, can she? Some people never learn." "Are you going to do anything about it?" "No, she is someone else's problem now." I am done with Brenda Kensington. And I meant it. The whole situation had taught me something valuable. You can stand up for yourself without letting the fight consume you. I had protected my property rights, held the HOA accountable, and helped create positive change in my community. That was enough. I did not need to chase Brenda's self-destruction across state lines. Catherine and I stayed on the dock until the stars came out, talking about everything and nothing: vacation plans, her sister's upcoming wedding, whether to get a dog. Normal, peaceful, wonderful conversations that had nothing to do with property disputes or HOA bylaws. That was the real victory, not the settlement money or the legal vindication or even Brenda's arrest. The real victory was reclaiming my peace. I had bought this property for the tranquility of the lake, for quiet mornings and peaceful evenings. The HOA had tried to take that from me, and I had fought to get it back. And now, sitting on my dock with someone I cared about, watching the moonlight dance on the water of Lake Norman, I had exactly what I had wanted all along: my property. My peace. My life, free from the tyranny of petty bureaucrats who thought their title gave them the right to ignore the law. The battle had been worth fighting, but the peace was worth even more. Later that summer, I was invited to speak at a property rights seminar in Raleigh. The organization, a non-profit focused on HOA reform, wanted me to share my story as a case study in how homeowners could successfully challenge overreach. I was hesitant at first. I had no interest in becoming a professional HOA warrior, but Patricia convinced me it would be valuable. "People need to hear that they can win these fights," she said. "Most homeowners just roll over when the HOA bullies them. Your story proves that standing up works." The seminar was held at a hotel conference center. About 200 people attended: homeowners, attorneys, and even a few legislators interested in HOA reform. I told my story from beginning to end, showing all the documentation, explaining the legal strategy, and being honest about the stress and cost of fighting back. During the question and answer session, a woman in her 30s raised her hand. She was near tears. My HOA is trying to foreclose on my house because I put up a fence without approval. The fence is on my property. It meets all county codes, but they say it violates their bylaws. I cannot afford to fight them. What do I do? I felt a surge of anger on her behalf. This was exactly the kind of abuse that happened when HOAs went unchecked. First, document everything. Every communication, every bylaw they cite, every fee they charge. Second, check if your state has an HOA ombudsman or dispute resolution program. Many states do. Third, look for legal aid organizations that handle property disputes. And fourth, go public. Local news loves HOA horror stories. Public pressure works. She nodded, writing frantically. Others raised hands with their own stories. HOAs demanding thousands in fines for petty violations. Boards refusing to maintain common areas while raising fees. Presidents embezzling funds. It was depressing how common the abuse was. After the seminar, multiple people approached me asking for advice. I gave out Patricia's card, explained the basics of property law, and encouraged everyone to stand firm if they were in the right. One elderly man shook my hand with tears in his eyes. They are trying to force me to cut down a tree my wife planted before she died. They say it blocks sight lines. Your story gives me hope that I can fight them. You can, I told him. Just make sure you have good documentation and do not back down. Driving home that night, I felt drained but purposeful. The Pier situation had been hell to live through, but if my experience could help others stand up to bullying HOAs, then maybe it had a larger meaning. Catherine was waiting when I got home. She had made dinner and opened a bottle of wine. How did it go? Good. Exhausting. A lot of people with terrible HOA stories. You going to become a full-time HOA fighter now? She was teasing, but there was a genuine question underneath. No, I will help people when I can, but this is not my crusade. I just want to live my life. Good answer. She kissed me. Because I have been thinking about moving in here, but only if you promise no more giant legal battles, I laughed. I promise to avoid them if at all possible. But if the HOA tries to build a roller coaster in my backyard, all bets are off. Deal. Catherine moved in that fall. We settled into a comfortable rhythm work, dinners on the dock, weekend trips to the mountains. The neighborhood had fully accepted me again. The Pier controversy was old news. New dramas had taken its place. Someone painted their house lime green. Another person installed an elaborate Halloween display that some neighbors found offensive. The HOA handled both situations reasonably, proving that leadership matters. Donald Fletcher stopped by one afternoon in October. He had a bottle of bourbon and a request. The board wants to give you something, a formal apology and a token of appreciation for helping with the new Pier project. That is not necessary. Probably not, but we are doing it anyway. Consider it closure. The ceremony was small, just the board members and a few neighbors. Donald read a formal statement apologizing for the HOA's actions under previous leadership and thanking me for my patience and consultation on the new Pier. Then he handed me a plaque. It read, "Presented to Yates Silverman for his commitment to property rights and community improvement. With gratitude, Lakeshore Estates, HOA Board." It was corny and over the top, but I appreciated the gesture. It was an acknowledgement that they had been wrong and I had been right. Sometimes that is all you need. I hung the plaque in my home office, right next to my property deed. It served as a reminder: stand up for what is right, even when it is hard. Document everything. Do not back down from bullies. And never, ever let an HOA president named Brenda build anything on your property without checking the survey first. The years that followed were blissfully drama-free. Catherine and I got married in a small ceremony on the dock. Our first child, a daughter we named Maya, was born 2 years later. Life was good. I never forgot the Pier battle, though. It shaped how I thought about community, about power, and about the importance of standing firm when you know you are right. I taught Maya, as she grew older, that sometimes doing the right thing means fighting, even when it would be easier to give in. The HOA continued to operate responsibly. Donald served 2 terms as president before retiring. His successors maintained the transparency and accountability he had established. Violations were handled fairly. Budgets were reasonable. The community thrived. And my dock, my beautiful, private, legally built on my own property dock, became the center of our family life. Maya learned to swim there. Catherine and I celebrated anniversaries there. Friends gathered for barbecues and boat rides. It was everything I had wanted when I bought the property. And I had it because I had refused to let the HOA steal it. Looking back, I would not change a thing. The fight had been stressful, expensive, and exhausting, but it had been worth it. Not just for me, but for every homeowner who came after, who benefited from an HOA that had learned to respect property rights and follow the law. That was the real legacy of the Pier that I demolished. Not the destruction, but the accountability it created. Not the conflict, but the reform that followed. And on quiet evenings, sitting on my dock with my family, watching the sun set over Lake Norman, I felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for the courage to fight back. Gratitude for the lawyers and supporters who helped me win. And gratitude for the peace that came after the battle was over. The story of the Pier became local legend. New residents would hear about it and ask me to tell the tale. I always obliged, emphasizing the importance of knowing your property rights and not being intimidated by HOA boards that overreach. Some people thought I was a hero. Others still thought I was selfish for tearing down a community amenity. I did not care either way. I had done what was right, and I could live with that in the end. That was all that mattered. Not what people thought, not whether I was popular, but whether I had stood up for my rights and held powerful people accountable when they broke the rules. I had. And my property, my beautiful, peaceful, Pier-free property, was the proof. The invoice I had sent to the HOA for the demolition costs, which they had initially refused to pay but ultimately covered as part of the settlement, hung framed in my office next to the plaque. $8,000 for services rendered, removing one illegally constructed pier from private property. It was the most satisfying bill I had ever sent in my life, and every time I looked at it, I smiled, remembering the night the saws roared and the pier came down, reclaiming what was mine. That was justice. Loud, expensive, and absolutely worth it.